Xiao Beihai stood before the colossal stone stele, his gaze locked onto the ancient carvings as beads of sweat traced slow rivers down his brow. The inscriptions weren't just words, they were warnings, carved by hands long turned to dust, and every syllable screamed a terrible truth he had once dismissed as rumor. Beside him, Zhang Xian reached out, her fingertips brushing the pitch-black surface, and in that instant, a shiver of icy blue energy coiled up like a serpent awakened from a 1,000-year sleep. She gasped, pulling her hand back. "This sealed stone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It breathes with a cold so fierce it could freeze the very soul." But before her warning could settle, Shang Jiahao burst through the crowd like a bull in a porcelain shop, a mountain of blue crystals slung over his shoulder and greed blazing in his eyes. He shoved aside everyone in his path, caring nothing for courtesy or caution, and the moment his gaze fell upon that dark monolith, his face lit up like a child on midwinter morn. "This," he crowed, "this is what I've been hunting for." He named it Black Frost Stone, a legendary ore, rarer than dragon's tears, used to forge weapons that could split the heavens. Compared to it, he scoffed, his precious blue crystals were nothing but pebbles on a beach. Yet the hall grew heavy, thick with silence and the stench of growing hunger. Greed crept into every pair of eyes, painting them with selfish light, and Xiao Beihai felt his stomach knot. He stepped forward, repeating Zhang Xian's warning like a prayer. This stone was no treasure, but a seal, a cage for a demon of the ancient clan. "Do not act recklessly," he urged, his voice low and urgent. But Shang Jiahao threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that echoed off the stone walls. "A monster," he sneered, "a fable to scare the meek and keep the bold from their prize." He pointed a crooked finger at Zhang Xian, accusing her of spinning lies to hoard the Black Frost Stone for herself. Zhang Xian's face flushed with righteous fury. As a daughter of the Nine Heavens Alliance, her honor was her shield, and she would never stoop to such deceit. But Shang Jiahao was already lost. He raised his voice, pretending to read the ancient script with the confidence of a fool who mistakes arrogance for wisdom. "It's a reward," he bellowed, "left for those worthy enough to reach this hall." His translation was a twisted web, spun purely to feed his own insatiable hunger. Zhang Shi stood frozen, her jaw slack with disbelief. She knew a lie when she heard one, and this was a whopper big enough to swallow the sun. Kai Changying stepped into the breach, planting herself before Shang Jiahao like a blade planted in stone. "I trust only Zhang Shi's words," she declared, her voice steady as bedrock. "Stop this madness before it consumes you." But then her eyes widened, for she saw the truth too late. Shang Jiahao was done with words. In a flash, faster than a serpent's strike, he unleashed a devastating kick that caught Kai Changying square in the chest, sending her hurtling through the air like a ragdoll until she crashed against the unforgiving stone wall with a thunderous boom that shook dust from the rafters. Zhang Shi cried out in panic, rushing to her fallen companion, who knelt now with blood trickling from her lips, her eyes burning with molten hatred. She had never known such shameless treachery. But Shang Jiahao stood cold and unrepentant, his voice dripping with venom. "This treasure is mine," he declared, "and I'll brook no obstacle." Xiao Beihai's voice cut through the chaos like a winter wind. "You shame the four great families with such vile conduct," he said, his tone icy enough to rival the frost stone itself. But Shang Jiahao spun without warning, his spear whistling through the air in a sweeping arc aimed straight at Xiao Beihai's throat. The battle had begun in earnest. "With the Black Frost Stone and my ice spear," Shang Jiahao roared, "my clan will rise above all others." Xiao Beihai dodged with the grace of a falling leaf, his voice calm as a still pond. "I care not for the stone," he replied, "but I will never let a snake like you claim it." And then they clashed. Shang Jiahao's ice spiritual energy erupted like a blizzard given flesh, while Xiao Beihai stomped the ground so hard the very stones shattered beneath his feet, launching himself forward like a thunderbolt. Shang Jiahao raised a wall of ice, its surface studded with razor-sharp spikes, daring his opponent to come near. But Xiao Beihai didn't flinch. He charged headlong, his fist crashing into that frozen barrier with a deafening explosion that sent shards of ice flying in every direction, a glittering storm of destruction. His punch didn't stop there. It drove through the wreckage and slammed square into Shang Jiahao's face, sending him tumbling across the ground like a broken puppet. From the floor, Shang Jiahao spat blood and snarled, That arm of yours won't last, the frost is already freezing your meridians. And indeed, Xiao Beihai glanced down to see a layer of ice creeping across his skin. But instead of fear, a smile curved his lips. Have you forgotten, he said softly, the Xiao family has its own secrets. At his signal, a subordinate rushed forward, hurling a crimson pill that radiated waves of intense heat. Xiao Beihai caught it and held it high. The blazing fire pill, he announced, 49 days to forge a single one, and it can melt any frost, shrug off any chill. He swallowed it in one gulp, and instantly, a surge of red energy erupted from his body, vaporizing the ice that had dared to cling to him. His strength restored, he taunted his foe, so, Shang Jiahao, what other tricks do you have? Shang Jiahao wiped the blood from his mouth, his mind racing. He knew his internal injuries were grave. This battle had to end, and fast. He tightened his grip on his spear, his spiritual energy flaring to its breaking point, his eyes gleaming with murderous intent. This was no longer a skirmish. This was a true life and death struggle. But Xiao Beihai stood unwavering, the blazing fire pill's power still radiating from his every pore. Your ice is useless against me now, he declared. And when Shang Juhao's attack came, Xiao Beihai answered with a single, devastating punch that shattered his opponent's weapon into 1,000 glittering fragments. Yet Shang Jiahao refused to yield. He pushed his energy to the absolute limit, summoning his ultimate technique, the Ice Spear Storm. In an instant, the sky above the hall filled with thousands of razor-sharp spears, their cold aura so terrifying it made the very air groan. They descended like a waterfall of death, covering the battlefield in a magnificent, horrifying deluge. The masked man who had watched from the shadows looked up in sheer horror, his confidence crumbling to dust. He tried to flee, but the spears were faster. They pierced his body and pinned him to the cold stone floor, a grim testament to the storm's fury. Even Xiao Beihai, with the fire pill's protection, felt the pressure mounting, forced onto the defensive. Nearby, Kai Changying swung her sword with blinding speed, shattering every projectile that came near, her blade forming a steadfast barrier as she studied Shang Juhao's every move, searching for the slightest crack in his defense. Zhang Xian, now! Her shout rang out like a battle cry. And Zhang Xian stepped forward, summoning an ancient zither that glowed with brilliant purple light. Spiritual energy swirled around her like a living cloak, and her fingers danced across the strings, producing sharp, piercing notes that transformed into sound wave blades, slicing through the air toward Shang Jiahao with deadly precision.